We now need to look at how these government economic objectives each impact the boom and the slump stage. We're not going to look at recession and recovery. So if we look at boom and we look at the good things that are going on at a boom, we see that there is high economic growth. Okay, so GDP is rising, and we see a lot of people in work. Okay, so there's low unemployment. So when there are a lot of people in work, it leads to a higher amount of spending. And when there is too much spending in the economy, it leads to high inflation. Okay, and what inflation is, it's the general rising of prices. Now, prices rising isn't a problem as long as wages are increasing with them, but that is often not the case. Okay, so when we see a lot of people in work, like I said, we see prices rise because for a multitude of reasons. Maybe there are resources running out. So because there's not as many left, people are willing to pay more for them, so the prices rise. You also see that suppliers get greedy and start to put up their prices. So there is many different reasons why inflation happens here. You don't need to know at this point. You just need to understand that at a boom, you start to see prices rise quicker than wages do. Okay, so there's a lot of good things at this point. There is high inflation is a real problem, and the government does have to look at addressing that, which we'll look at how they do that later on. So let's look at the opposite side of this in a slump then. Okay, in a slump, right down the bottom, we start to see low economic growth. The economy is just not growing enough. Okay, we're starting to see high unemployment. Okay, a lot of people are out of work, and to a certain extent, the inflation is too low. Okay, maybe inflation has only dropped to 1%. Now, really, what you want to be doing is, if wages would potentially still be rising by 2%, and if your inflation is only at 1%, this causes additional problems. Okay, we're not going to get into that now. Okay, but really, it's below the target 2% inflation rate, most probably in a slump. Okay, so we've got various problems at each stage that the government needs to try and correct. Okay, so at a boom, there's the main problem that we're going to look at today is high inflation. Okay, it needs to try and sort out high inflation. Okay, because people are spending too much. Okay, in a slump, there is a multitude of problems. We can see low economic growth, high unemployment, and too low inflation. Okay. So we need to understand what the government has, what tools does it have in order to sort out all these problems. Okay, and it has two main things. Okay, one is called fiscal policy and one is called monetary policy. Now, fiscal policy is the use of taxes, and the second aspect of it is government spending. Okay, now that's what the government do when it outlines sort of the taxes it's going to collect. Is it going to collect it through income tax, corporate tax, and whatever. Okay. Now, one thing you need to understand, and it's a relatively straightforward concept, is the higher the taxes, the less people have to spend. Okay, the less ability a company has to expand and take on new staff if it's paying higher taxes. Okay, the less taxes that are paid, okay, through income tax or through corporate tax, means that people have more money to spend and companies have more money to spend on expansion. Okay, so really to think about is when taxes are high and taxes are low, what impact that has. Okay, the second part of the fiscal policy is government spending. So hopefully you know that the government collects in money from taxation and it spends it on schools, roads, whatever. Okay, and in any country, okay, the government is always the highest spender. Okay, even in America with Apple and Amazon or whatever, the US government spend far more than all of those. Okay, so how much a government spends has a huge impact on how well the country is really going to do. Okay, so if you can imagine that the government wants to spend money on building a new hospital. Okay, well, it needs to buy the building equipment, like the bricks and so on. It needs to rent the JCBs and whatever. It needs to employ builders to build it. It needs to fill it with doctors, nurses, administrators, whatever. Okay. Now, all of this has an impact, okay, because it means that more of these people in work, so they're able to go out and spend a lot more. Okay. If they decided to, let's say they decided to sack a load of teachers and teaching assistants because they were spending too much, well, those teachers and teaching assistants are now out of work and unable to go and spend money in the local area and on that economy. Okay, and if people don't spend, people start to lose jobs. Okay, so you have this essentially this multiplier effect. The government spends money, it generally means that more people are able to go and spend that money. Okay, so a one person spending is another person's wages. Okay, so that's what we need to have an understanding is the more government spending, the more positive impact it has. The less government spending, the negative impact it has on spending. Okay. So that's fiscal policy. Now what you've got here is monetary policy. Okay. Now, monetary policy is interest rates. Okay, now you may have heard of interest rates before. Okay, and what interest rates are is essentially the reward you get for saving your money. Okay, and the punishment you have for borrowing money. Okay, so let's say that you borrow £2,000 from the bank. Now, the bank doesn't give you that for out of the goodness of its own heart. Okay, it's trying to make money on that also. Okay, so if you are borrowing this money, and the interest rate is higher, you have to pay more back. If the interest rate is lower, you have to pay less back. So really, once interest rates are lower, it's more attractive for you to borrow money, isn't it? Okay, so let's say you borrowed that £2,000 and interest rates are at 10%. Okay, well, you're going to have to pay quite a lot back. But if you compare that to interest rates being 2%, okay, well, you might think, oh, it's just probably a good idea to borrow that money. So if you think about that in terms of people and their spending and companies and their spending, okay, if interest rates are low for businesses and interest rates are low for people, okay, they're more likely to borrow money. Those people go out and spend that money. Okay, and like I said before, one person's spending is another person's wages. Okay, and interest rates are low for companies. What they're going to do is they're more likely to borrow money to expand their business. Okay, so low interest rates has this impact of making more people spend. Higher interest rates means it's not very attractive for businesses and people to borrow money. Okay, it's actually more attractive for them to leave the money in their bank accounts. Okay, and if people are leaving money in the bank accounts, then they're less likely to go and spend money. Okay, so I've put some YouTube clips here on fiscal and monetary policy. Okay, and hopefully you can have a look through those and maybe have an understanding a little bit deeper of what I've just gone through now.